All right, you should be getting a notification for that.
We
All
got
right.
it.
Yep. So, for the audience that does not know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
Great, George. Good to be with you today. I'm James Catledge. I run a podcast called Inside Out. It's the story of my run-in with the criminal justice system, and I won't spoil the story. It's a good one to actually listen to. But I had a family, married 23 years, 6 children, running a very large business across the entire United States, several provinces of Canada. We were doing, I don't know, 40, 50 million a year in revenue. We had 8,000 licensed insurance agents. We had a company plane, 2 pilots. We were running a sizable business when the federal government decided they wanted to take a closer look. I had a real estate partner. We were selling timeshares. They call them fractionals, but in essence, they're timeshares in the Dominican Republic. Our partner was Maxim Magazine. Maxim Publishing was the brand on these hotels. And I'm not a construction guy, but I know how to raise money. And so my financial planners raised the capital, and my partner did the construction and had the construction team and the hotel development experience to actually build the properties. And it worked real well for several years. We built 1 hotel, built a second hotel, and then we're in the middle of building a third when things seemed to slow down dramatically enough that I needed to take some action to protect my investors. And so I sued my partner on behalf of the investors. It was a lawsuit filed in Miami federal court. It took a lot to actually make that decision. It was not a casual matter. We in suing my partner, we had 644 victims/investors, along with me and my salespeople, in that lawsuit against the developer. And in that lawsuit, the judge made a decision that the salesman and the sales organization, which is us, should not be suing the developer. The clients could sue the developer, but not the people who sold it. And so he threw the case out and asked each of the investors to file separately. 644 people filed their own lawsuits, and then he encouraged them to name the company that they were doing business with, which was us, my company. And then he asked them to name the salesman who sold them the timeshare. And so now we've got mass litigation across the United States. And, and the final thing the judge did is he foreclosed on the property, the hotel in question. And he actually had all the guests that were staying at the hotel exit the hotel. He cashed out the bank accounts and gave it to his special master for his accounting fees, and then turned the case over to the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the IRS. And so that's when things got real heavy for me. My lawsuit, which I financed and paid for, turned into a colossal nightmare that I now had to defend myself as a partner with this developer. And so that took 10 years, George. It was from 2008 when I filed the lawsuit, 2018 when I entered a federal courtroom and changed my plea from not guilty to guilty. And that of course led to a prison sentence where I was sentenced to 60 months in federal prison. And that experience is chronicled very well in the Inside Out podcast. So that's, I could do more. I'm a returned Mormon missionary. I'm an Eagle Scout. I grew up conservative in the South. There was no signs of trouble in my childhood. There was no evidence that I would ever be in a federal prison ever, but it happened. And I guess that's the main point of the message for me. And I guess the lesson I picked up is things happen, and things don't always happen in your control. And when they do happen, now what? What do you do now that the bad news has showed up? And I think we all have the ability to make some choices in those critical moments. And it is in those choices that our destiny kind of gets defined. And so that's the purpose of my podcast, Inside Out, is to get what's inside of you out and keep control of the things that matter most, which is your decision making and frankly your mind. So anyway, that's my introduction.
So what did you learn about people after having your trust broken by your business partner?
Well, I learned a lot. I felt like I kind of knew a little bit about people. I was running a sizable business, so I felt like I had a grip on human nature. But I think if I were to sum it up in one answer, I think I learned that you can be deceived by anybody. You can be deceived by people that you're very close to. You can be tricked. You can be deceived. You can even drop your guard enough and signs be present that you're being deceived, and you block them out for greed reasons, for personal gain. Sometimes even I think of the gambler issue. You know, I live in the city of Las Vegas, and gamblers are famous for thinking it's the next hit, or it's the next card, or it's the next pull of the slot machine that's going to turn their fortunes. And we know that's not true. I mean, we just know scientifically that it's really, you can be tricked by anybody. And I know today, being on the outside, having learned that lesson, that you have to make a decision. Am I going to live my life in fear and climb down in a hole and just be afraid of everybody because anybody can trick me at any time? Or am I going to proceed with confidence and trust and know that deception is probably rare, and that I can probably proceed with confidence and trust in most people and let them show me otherwise? And that's just the way I've chosen to do it. I think this type of experience, which was really riveting for me, having gone all the way through the criminal justice system and actually inside a federal facility, there's a tendency to want to just not trust anybody. But I don't think that's a healthy way to live for me. I've decided that I'm going to trust until you show me different. And so the lesson ultimately, George, is you can be deceived by anybody. And so now that you know that, you have a choice to make. Am I going to live my life afraid of everything because I can be deceived at any time? Or am I going to live my life knowing that most people are trustworthy? Most people are trying to do it correctly. And so if that's the case, I'm going to proceed as if until I see signs differently.
So in terms of deception, right? Is there ever a part of you now, and this isn't in the question list, but I just, as a follow-up,
Yeah.
you know, which is that you've been through this very unfortunate experience where you do have somebody very close to you, right? Like, did that alter your perception at all? Like, for at least a little bit, that you couldn't trust anybody? Because, you know, I mean, you've been on Matt Cox's show. He himself was even like, look, I'd cut off anybody's head to get out of prison.
Yeah.
Like, all these guys are a bunch of scumbags. Why wouldn't I snitch on them? You know, so when you get
Yeah.
that type of environment, you go to federal prison, and, you know, your close business partner is betraying you. And, you know, next thing you know, he's doing this millions of dollars and scams and scamming the hell out of people. How do you cope with the distrust after something like that?
You know, I think it's a choice. I think we're all wired a little differently. George, I think we have to decide how we're going to live our life. And it is a personal decision. And for me, I've just made the decision that for me, it's a healthier path to assume trust in everyone until I see signs otherwise. Now, I'm wise from the experience. I'm not casting aside the riveting experience I had, but at the same time, I don't want to live my life worried that everybody's trying to deceive me, because I don't think that's true. I think everybody's probably not trying to deceive me. And so I'm going to proceed that way. But that again, it's a personal choice. I think sometimes we're wired so afraid that we may take a situation like this and think everybody's out to get us. I mean, my time in federal prison was it sounds so crazy to even hear myself say it, but it was a good experience. And I had good experiences with inmates. I had good experiences with cartel members. I had good experiences with folks from other races that typically were segregated off inside of federal prison, where the white people stay with the white people, the blacks stay with the blacks, the Mexicans stay with the Mexicans, islanders stay together. But where I was, and I can't speak for all federal prisons, but where I was, there was a bit of integration, and there was a bit of, clearly there was segregation, but there was a bit of integration amongst guys who could trust each other. And I found that trusting was a better path. And so I just think, you know, if you've got an audience full of young adults And I know that's who you cater your podcast to. I would just advise them that you need to be wise to the idea that deception is out there. And I've heard this statistic, and I can't give you some source for it, but 1 in 7 are criminal in nature. Okay, 1 in 7. So if you have a group of 21 people, you got three people in the room who have a criminal nature about them. Okay, it doesn't mean they're criminals; it just means they think perhaps about a way to get an angle, get an edge, take advantage. They just have a different way of approaching the world. Well, that's 1 in 7. So I'm gonna be mindful of that possibility, but I'm not gonna make my decisions about it. So I don't have distrust issues. I really don't.
So what did you learn while you were in prison? Because you're saying it's a good experience. One thing I want to ask is, what did you learn about freedom and happiness after being wrongfully put in prison?
Good. Let me break that up. I would say there's a lot of lessons I learned. I had the opportunity to be on a speaking team that went out to high schools and actually talked to young people about making good choices. And that group was called the Outspoken Group, where most of the people in the group actually committed their crimes. Okay. And they're talking about how to avoid the pitfalls of a criminal life. And in order for me to be approved to be in the group, I had to submit my speech to the counselor who supervised that group. And my story is a little different because I was in a criminal enterprise, but I wasn't committing criminal conduct. And so I didn't want my story to be one of excuses. My story needed to be one that would help the kids. And so I spent time focusing on your peer group, your reference group, the people you hang with, and how they can really influence the outcomes in your life. And that if you're not careful, you could be in a car with guys who go in and knock off a liquor store, knock off a 7-Eleven, and you're just in the car. And all of a sudden you're charged with the same crime. And so I think it's important that who you hang with dictates the outcomes in your life. The friends you choose to have, and we have a choice about friends. It's either those that make us feel good the way we are, or those that cause us to rise up to another level. So some of us are more comfortable with friends that kind of, I like the way you are. I wouldn't ask you to change a thing. I just don't want, I wouldn't want to put any pressure on you to make any changes. We're just friends no matter what you do. Well, that's one kind of friend. I actually think it's a better friend who calls you on your BS, who calls you when you're out of line, who calls you when you're stepping maybe on the wrong side of the tracks. I think that's the kind of friends I'm looking for. I want a peer group that makes me better, not keeps me down. I mean, I want to grow. I want to improve my life, and I want to do the things necessary to make my life better. And I can't do it if I'm surrounded by people who are uncomfortable if I start to grow. So I think in prison, one of the great lessons I learned is you can be a lifter, you can be positive, you can be optimistic, and you can make a great difference in people's lives. But don't be the kind of friend. This is for me now. I'm not telling your audience how to be a friend, but for me, I don't want to be the kind of friend that doesn't cause my friends to want to rise up, to level up, to be better. And that's one of the things I try to do in there. This is kind of a funny situation, but we were in cubicles, two men to a cubicle. There was room for 3, but our prison wasn't so overpopulated that we needed 3 in every cubicle. So we only had 2. And I would, in each cubicle are 2 beds, 2 chairs, a couple of hooks for your laundry, and then a shared locker. And I would have men lined up 10, 12 deep to sit in the spare chair in our cubicle while my cellmate disappeared, so people could have discussions with me about stuff that it was weighing heavy on them. And I'm not trained in this. I'm not trained in psychology. I'm not trained in therapy. I have no background in any of this stuff. But because I call people on their BS, and because it's just the way I'm wired to be optimistic and positive and kind of see the best in people are drawn to that. And in prison, there's not a lot of that. There's not a lot of that going on. And so my cubicle became my office. And every day for 14 months, I was interviewing men, talking to them about their life, listening to their story. Some of it was filled with shame. Some of their stories were filled with guilt. Some of their stories were filled with terrible sadness. And I did what I could to lift those men, to encourage those men, to share with them things that I thought would be helpful in them, marking a path for the rest of their life. Because most people get out. Most of these guys are going to do a little time and then get out, and they need some constructive pathways. And so that's what I spent my time in there doing. As far as happiness, what did I learn about freedom and happiness? Man, I've never felt more joy that I can measurably explain to you than the day I walked out of Mendota Medium Federal Prison. Just the sunlight. Now, remember, we're in the middle of the COVID, so we were locked down 23 and a half hours a day, no sunlight, food shoved through the middle of the door in a slot. We didn't leave for meals. We didn't leave for showers. We didn't leave for bathroom. It's all in our cell. We're locked down. And so the happiest day, I would say, of my life, without any comparison, is the day I walked out of federal prison. And so I think that has put a new lens on the rest of my life, the way I see life, the way I see people, the way I judge people, the way I assess people. All of those were things I picked up from that experience, which I think are positive for me.
So what did you learn about yourself while you're in this? Because you're basically describing it as solitary confinement almost, where you're alone, you're not really having the opportunity to talk to people. And when you are talking to people, it's these stories of, justifications of why they did what they did, or, just a million justifications and where they're coming from. And you're learning how a very flawed person functions. So in the midst of all this, what did you learn about you?
Yeah, I think I learned that I can endure hard things. I think I learned that the theory of enduring hard things is one thing, but the reality of it is another. And it's really never really tested. You can read all the positive books. You can read all the self-help books. You can teach that stuff from the stage. You can be a great motivational speaker. And there's so many of them out there that are noteworthy book writers. But until you've been through the crucible of life, whether it be a health scare, whether it be some heavy litigation, whether it be a divorce, whether it be a prison sentence, until you've been through the crucible and those theories get tested, you don't really know. It's all just a theory. And I hoped when I went in that all my life preparation would serve me well in this test. But you don't know till it happens. And so what I learned about me, George, is that I can do hard things, and that I can do it well, and that I can thrive in a difficult environment. And I don't actually need someone else to encourage me. I'm the encourager. And I found that by being that, it lifted me. My own spirit could be lifted and enhanced and improved by lifting others. So I think that's what I learned about me.
So moving back to the question of now other people and Derek specifically. So what motivated Derek here? Was it fame? Was it money? Because over the phone we spoke about this, and you yourself have said it in interviews where he was this guy who was driven by fame, but he also, ended up kind of being driven by money. I didn't really get a sense that he wanted power, but what drove him? What was his end game exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I can't really climb in his head, but I could guess, because I was close to Derek. My assessment of that, and I've had a lot of time to think about it, naturally, because I allowed Derek in his kind nature, and I would say he's a gentle, kind guy. I allowed that kind nature to, frankly, get close enough to me to let my guard down. And I think if I were to guess what motivated Derek, Derek I would consider lower IQ. I'm just going to put that out there. And I think that his father was the brainchild of the business, and his dad, Fred, put him in charge of the business. And I think that happened around the time I got involved with the Elliott family. Dad had been in charge of this hotel development. That was Dad's business. Dad had bought the land. Dad had built the hotels. Dad had hired the staff and the team. And Derek was still a young man up and coming. And so when I met Derek, he was probably 32, and maybe a little too young and lacking life experience to take on the reins of running a massive hotel operation. But, and I would not say power motivated Derek. I would say fame and probably money, because I think money yields some of that fame he was seeking. And there were many times I would come to the resort to check on things, and he would be in a magazine shoot. So he had gotten some magazine to come down and film him by the pool and by plants and all sorts of shots, and he was changing clothes for these photo shoots. And I was thinking to myself, hey man, we're trying to do serious business here. What, neither one of us are celebrities. I'm raising the money, you're running the hotel and running construction. What do we need with magazine shoots? And then there was a film Ben Affleck starred in called Man About Town. Derek gave $1 million of client money to finance the film so that he could be seen on the poster as an executive director of that movie. Derek also, this is what leads me to believe that fame was kind of a primary motivator for him. Disney had done a movie called Love Wrecked. Love Wrecked starred a young actress named Amanda Bynes, who is a young child actress who's, just beautiful and had a really thriving career at the time. Well, she's the star of the movie Love Wrecked. That was all filmed at our resort, the Sun Village Resort and Spa in the Dominican Republic. And so Derek had arranged for all this. Derek had been in touch with the Disney people. Derek had been in touch with ABC. Derek had been in touch with almost like a PR firm that dealt with Hollywood. And so he was really kind of into that. And I think it was almost a sideline focus, the hotel development business. And I think I wouldn't say, the government has classified this as a Ponzi scheme. And no doubt about it, there are real investors who lost real money here. No, we cannot diminish that in any way. Real people lost real money. I'm one of them. My mother's one of them. Her retirement was in here. My wife and I had our funds in there. So there's real folks who I know well lost real money here. But I don't believe Derek's intentions were to steal their money. I don't believe that. I believe he just got lazy in the management of the operation, in cash flow management, and was spending inappropriately funds that were dedicated to the building and construction of the hotels. And I think it's that simple. I don't think it was a set out from the beginning, we're going to steal these people's money, James is going to raise it, we're going to split the dough. I don't think any of those thoughts occurred. I know we never had meetings like that. There was never any shut door rooms where we had those type of discussions. That just didn't happen. So it's easy when you look back on things like this to kind of classify him as this evil guy did this and that, and you can see how greedy this guy is. He's doing film shoots. I don't believe that. Knowing him and knowing the whole experience, and frankly, he tried to blame me for all this stuff. So I have every reason in the world to want to, say bad things about Derek Elliott. But I'll tell you, just laying it out for you, I don't believe that Derek intended to harm these people. I don't believe that Derek intended to cause any victims. I believe Derek's low IQ and mismanagement of the cash flow created the outcome that we all live with today. That's how I see it.
So where do you think Derek's obsession with fame came from? Because it feels like somebody who is just pathologically obsessed with fame to a point where he's doing everything in his power to impress people who have large amounts of attention, ultimately so that he can even get a small piece of attention. So we get his name near Ben Affleck's name. That's somebody, not even so we can get his picture next to him. No, just so we can get his name. That's somebody who by his very definition is just intrinsically focused down to his DNA on fame, to the point where he's spending client money in the millions to do so.
Yes.
So where do you think that this came from?
I don't know. I wasn't raised with Derek. I don't know I do know his mother and I do know his father. These are normal people. Hardworking mother, hardworking father. I think the father has some schemish elements in him, almost a more higher IQ, conniving nature to him. I just put that out there. I think those are facts. There's enough history with Fred Elliott to actually see that. But as far as Derek's need for fame, it could be an attention-seeking thing. It could be an insecurity. I don't really know. I'd be psychoanalyzing him to even guess, George. But I would say it was a primary driver that kept his attention off what it should have been. And there's just no way around that. There's just no way around it.
Well, after seeing somebody like him, who you could probably make the assumption that he's internally dissatisfied somehow. I'm not even going to try to speculate how or why. But after seeing somebody like that who's intrinsically dissatisfied with themselves to the point where they're constantly looking for somebody else to tell them how great they are, what did you learn about the place of other people's opinions in your own life?
Yeah, I'd already kind of gotten over that idea. I think as a young man, having been a Mormon missionary, you kind of get past other people's views of you. When you put on a suit and board a bicycle and start riding around on a 10-speed in a 3-piece suit, you better be over what people think of you because it's not going to go well. For me, the opinion, everybody wants to be favored. I don't think any of us can get around the idea that we want to be favored. We would like more likes than less likes. We would prefer to be approved and not disapproved of. I think that's just part of a human being's experience. But your opinion is not going to guide me. Your opinion is not going to guide my decision making. I will listen and value the input, but it'll go into the calculus of what I need to decide. I'm not moving around based on other people's view. I mean, in high school, I even think about it. I was the designated driver. I refused to participate in drugs and alcohol and all the stuff that a lot of my buddies were involved in. I was the designated driver. So I wasn't even feeling the peer pressure as a young high school kid. I was quite comfortable with the idea that my mind was important and that I wasn't going to do anything to damage it. I don't want to do anything that could cause it any harm. I felt my judgment mattered, and anything that would, anything that could disrupt my judgment could be dangerous. And so I was already over that. I didn't need Derek Elliott to come along and teach me that lesson.
So moving away from opinions, fame, and Derek, what do you think your biggest regret was in all of this?
Yeah, that's good. I have had a lot of time to think about that, and I have a few. I think I could have done more to protect the investor. I think I was distracted personally by the amount of money flowing. I really do. I mean, we were making lots of money. I think when you add it up, me personally was probably somewhere in the order of 15, 18 million. And then the company, 35 to 36 million, if you do the math on all the money that was raised and what was earned. I think I don't want to say buried my head in the sand because I didn't do that. I was constantly calling Derek and Fred out on things that I didn't think were appropriate. But I believe I let them get by with more than they should have. I believe I delayed some of my reactions longer than I should have. I believe when I finally sued them, it was too late. That took a while to make that decision. It was so hard to make that decision because my money's tied up there. My mother's money's tied up there. All my friends' money's tied up there. That decision was a hard one because I know I'm basically cutting my own throat by stopping the project, shutting it down, and bringing the attention of lawsuits, The other regret I have is, and I know this now and I didn't know it then, I could have required all the money to go into escrow, meaning it's not going to be released to the developer directly until they meet certain obligations. That's my mistake. I could have, I was in charge of raising the money. That typically, if you're in charge of raising the money, you can kind of set up some of the rules by which that money flows. And I could have required escrow and I didn't. That's completely on me. And I regret that. I totally have regrets about that because I think I could have saved a lot of the losses by handling it that way. So that's some of the list of the regrets I have. And I do believe I was deceived, self-deceived, self-deluded. And we all have to be careful with that. Whenever we're in the middle of something that's to our benefit, I think we have the risk of self-dilution there. And I think for me, and that's something I guard now in decision making around business, is, am I self-deluding here? Am I deluding myself here because the benefits are so good? So I think we all need to watch that. And I think, again, it's a human nature trait to kind of overlook or brush aside things that may be red flags. If the reward or the end of the rainbow is so good, I think we forgive too quickly, and I think we set aside too quickly things that are warnings. So that I would say that's something you could take with you and benefit from. I think Malcolm Gladwell has written a book about this called Blink. In the blink of an eye, I mean, if you read that book, it's fabulous. In the blink of an eye, we really know what to do, but then we start to talk ourselves out of it because the benefits and the gain and all these other things, they refer to it as your gut instinct. And following that gut instinct and beginning to rely upon it is really a good idea. So those are just some of the regrets, George.
So random question, but how much were you worth at the height of this all?
We had to do some of these reports actually in some of the litigation. So I have a pretty good feel for an exacting number. I think we were like 72 to 75 million was the net worth if you include the liquid and illiquid assets, the real estate, the plane, the businesses, the buildings, the cash, everything. So not what I think I could be worth. You know what I'm saying? I think I'm capable of more, but that was it at the time, 72 to 75 million.
And that was of you as an individual?
Well, I had a wife and kids, but yeah, it's our family's net worth. Yeah.
So was that money ultimately seized, or like, do you still have that money, or like?
No. It was all, we started over the day we were released from prison. We spent 10 years fighting. So a lot of that money we settled. We had, this is all pretty well documented, but we had to settle all those lawsuits. So we paid a lot of money in cash. We gave up our family home. We had a $4.5 million family home in Rancho Santa Fe. We had a home here in Las Vegas. We had commercial buildings. All that stuff had to be, the airplane, everything had to be sold off, liquidated. We lived off some of it over that 10 years while we were fighting, because I had 6 children, all in various stages of middle school, elementary school, and high school. And so you just can't imagine trying to have your children not feel the screws tightening on their dad while you're trying to keep them under a roof that feels similar to the roof that we once had, right? So it's easy to increase your lifestyle. It's very, very difficult to lower it. And we spent 10 years incrementally lowering it just because there was no new funds coming in. I closed my business. I shut it down to focus on the litigation against the Elliots. I was tired of taking phone calls about, hey, I haven't heard anything about my payments. What's going on? And we don't control their money or have control of their payments. And so I knew we needed to fight. And so I put all my energy and resources. I financed all the litigation. Litigation alone cost $8.5 million. I then had to defend myself. The litigation turned into self-defense and had to now pay lawyers to defend me. And then, of course, we lived off of it. So by the time I went in, I think we probably had $60,000 and for my wife to, pay the bills. She became a school teacher, and she had not worked up until that point. So she was busy trying to get her teaching certificate and become a school teacher. And today she's a fabulous school teacher. We're divorced, but she's a fabulous school teacher and does a wonderful job with learning impaired students in her school district. And I'm super proud of how she handled that situation, because I would say it was tougher on her than me. I had the benefit of being in the fight, she just was a sideline participant and watching all this with no control and no ability to do anything about it other than suffer. So she suffered greatly. She took care of the kids, made sure they were healthy psychologically as well as physically. But anyway, so no, we started over on the backside. The day I got out, I think they handed me a debit card with $183 on it. I think my mother had an account with about $6,000 in it, and that's where we began.
So going now to, and this is something I want to ask you, but so your kids, what kind of a mindset do you try to instill in your kids? Like, what's the end game of like what type of a person you would want your kids to be, or your ideal kid to be?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. I have 6 kids, so and they're all different. And I will tell you this: if you're having children, and your audience is probably young adults that are starting families, I will tell you this: as a parent, I think we take too much credit for the good in our kids, and I think we take too much blame for the bad. And I know this about me: my mother did her damnedest to raise me properly. She can not take any responsibility for any bad, and she should take less credit for any good, because I made those choices. I make the choices today. I don't call her and make the choices. I make them, and I choose my path. And I think our kids do that. I had the blessing of having my 6 kids visit every single month I was incarcerated. We have visitation, when you're in prison, you can have the kids come see you. And I had friends from my church bring them up every 30 days to see me, drive 6 hours from San Diego to Central Valley, California, Taft, specifically outside of Bakersfield, to see my kids. And I was able to share with them funny stories, great experiences. This is what Dad's up to make it light, make it not heavy, and to make it a good experience. I did not want them going home and concerned about Dad's safety, Dad's security, what is going on with our dad. I felt like it could affect them negatively. And I wanted them to, as much as possible, to have a good experience. So I kept a blog, which was a personal letter to my kids. Every week I wrote a cool experience that I had that week and sent it to my kids. My mom took those same letters and began to publish them to my friends, which became the genesis of Inside Out, those stories, those experiences, because they were so specific. So my kids, I can't speak completely for how it affected them, but I did meet with them every single month and tried to really focus in on how their lives, their school, their activities, and not so much about, having the world revolving around my desperate situation there. And so I think it's as good as it can be. When I got home, it was very important for me to sit with them knee to knee and ask each of them, how did this affect you? How did you deal with this? What did you tell your friends when your friends found out your dad went to prison? How did those stories go? Some talked about it openly. Some kept it to themselves. They each handled it differently, George. And I would say I'm not in their shoes, so I can't speak for them. But I know it must have been very difficult to explain that the dad you're proud of, the dad that you love, is in federal prison. I can't imagine explaining that to my friends. But some of my kids did. They had that conversation. And I've got a homecoming king as one of the 6 kids. These are big high schools. They all went to the same high school, 3,000 or 4,000 students there at their high school. I've got captains of football teams. We've got cheerleaders. I've got integrated kids that did well in school and very good with their social group. And now time has moved on. We've got kids that are graduating college. They've got kids that are in college on scholarships. So we've got, and my youngest are now seniors in high school. They're identical twins and they're seniors in high school. And everybody seems to have integrated well. And again, I don't want to speak for them, because they have their own inner thoughts and their own private feelings about this. But from Dad's perspective, it was as good as it could be.
So now going very generally, very, very generally,
Sure.
right? What is the most important lesson? If you could condense it down, right? Maybe
Yeah.
one or two sentences, what is the most important lesson you've learned having lived the life that you've led?
That's a really good question. Because of my experience in prison and the life prior to that, I mean, I was the kid who grew up as the designated driver. I was the Eagle Scout. I'm the guy that went to church every Sunday. I was not the kid who was going to go to federal prison. Okay, that was not the way. Not just not the way I was brought up. That was not the way I was wired. Okay, and I certainly never thought I would get crossways with the government, where I've got the American flag hanging out on my porch every 4th of July, every Labor Day, every chance I can put the flag out. I mean, that's me. I never imagined USA versus James Catledge would ever be a thing, ever. And to this day, I still am extremely proud to be an American citizen. I'm proud of my country. Everything about it. But to answer your question specifically, and I think this applies to all of us, I think we underestimate the power of our mind to save us from difficult situations. I call it, for me, my mind is the asset. It is my mind that has the ability to save me from difficult circumstances. It is my mind that has the ability to reach out to someone who needs help and perhaps save them. It is my mind that has the ability to get control of a negative situation and make sure my spirit is not destroyed by it. And I think we all have that power. I think some of us give that power away to religion. I think some of us give that power away maybe to somebody else, a best friend, a mentor, or whatever. But I'm telling you, your mind is the asset. And if you'll keep control of it, not destroy it, not damage it, not do experiments on the weekend with it, keep control of your mind. And I think it can give you the clarity in difficult circumstances. When things are getting real heavy, the mind can sift, sort, and make great decisions. And I think we have to remember, bad times pass, dark storm clouds pass. No, I mean, mine took a decade. I never imagined that dark storm taking a decade, but it took a decade. And so even if it takes a while, it's going to pass. And the other side of it is the other side of it, you're left with the choices you made in the middle of it. What are the choices you make in the middle of the storm? Because that is what your life will look like on the other side. So I think in the beginning, when things start to gather, the storm clouds gather and things start to get rough, I think you have to decide, all right, how do I want to come out of this? What do I want life to look like on the other side of this? And begin to make the decisions now that reflect that outcome. And if you can do, it's hard. I'm saying something that I did, but it is a difficult thing to do. But if you can not make defeated decisions, don't make decisions that are give up decisions. Don't make decisions that are so permanent. Don't make decisions that are so catastrophic because things seem tough now. Make decisions based on the other side of the storm. And I think you'll be very proud of how it turns out. I think you'll be very pleased with who you become in the middle of that storm. You know, all fairy tales, if you look at the moral of all fairy tales, the dragon guards the treasure. There is no treasure that's left open for you to sneak up on. Dragons guard the treasure. So in life, if you want the treasure, if you want your life to be grand and wonderful and full of the things of abundance, you got to get past the dragon. And the dragon is there to test your ability to control your mind and to make great decisions on the way to the treasure. So that would be the big lesson, George, if I were to leave it with you.
So now the follow-up to that, if you had to live your life over again, would you do it?
Would I live my life again? Or would
Yeah.
I 100%? And I wouldn't change anything if that's the rest of that question. Because some people, well, there's lots of things I would change, but they're incremental. The big themes, the big threads of my life, which include federal prison, which include my Mormon mission, which includes these things no longer a part of my life. All those are critical to getting me right now. Critical to the of who I am. And I would want to end up right. I wouldn't want to end up anywhere else. So I would say don't change it. But some of the decisions in the middle of that stuff, obviously, as a human being, I can see all sorts of corrective things I would do that would probably make it better. But, I like the big threads of my life. I'm really happy about it. And I really believe that all of us face difficult times. I mean, we've spent today focusing on mine, but everybody is either in the middle of one or just ended one or headed toward one. We all have difficulty. The question is, now what? What are we going to do now? Difficulty is certain. The question isn't whether you're going to have difficulty. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And if you can make the decision to keep control of your mind, make the good decisions, make decisions based on the outcome you're looking for, I think you'll be fine. And you'll be set up for the next storm. There's going to be storms. Hopefully this was the big one, right? Hopefully there's not much bigger. But we're all going to be tested. We're all going to have difficulty. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think we can all manage the difficulty, or it wouldn't be presented to us.
So I have two questions left. So what do you think the biggest flaw in the justice system is after living through a false conviction?
Thought about that. There's a couple of flaws that I see that could be fixed. Number one, this premise that we're innocent till proven guilty is not true. The moment you're indicted, you're guilty. And an indictment is done in secret. An indictment is done with a grand jury where the prosecutor presents a one-sided story where the defendant's not allowed to be present. A defendant's representative is not allowed to be present. The prosecutor gets a one-way shot on a one-way street with a one-way narrative to get 12 people to hear their version of events. And so an indictment always happens. They always indict. They don't get the other side of the story. I had lunch with a female grand jury member, and she said to me, James, I listened to your podcast. And I thought to myself, I was on a grand jury for a year and a half. We all indicted every single person. There wasn't a person we didn't indict. And when I listened to your podcast, I thought, wow, what if we just heard the other side? Would we have indicted everybody, or maybe half, or maybe less than half? She said, no, we never get to hear the other side. So that's one of the flaws, George, I would change. Is if there's going to be a grand jury paneled, let the defendant be present. Let the grand jury ask the defendant any questions they want. If the defendant doesn't want to be present, their attorney should be permitted to be present. So anyway, that's flaw number one. Flaw number two is you really, the plea bargain system. 96% of all federal indictments end in a plea bargain, not a trial. They end in a plea bargain. And the reason that's the case is a plea bargain discounts the time you'll serve by like tenfold. If you go to trial because you know you're innocent and you'd like to prove your facts to 12 of your peers, which is what our Constitution is designed for, is a fair trial, and you get to present your facts and you get to clear your name if you're truly innocent and all this stuff. Well, the problem with that is if you're found guilty, the penalty's 10x over the plea deal. So in my case, I was facing 31 years in federal prison to go to trial. And those that go to trial, 90% of those are convicted, because all you need to do is show that this guy made money, those people lost money, he had an airplane, they live in a cardboard box. Of course he's guilty. Of course he's guilty. It's that simple. We don't really care about the emails. We don't really care about the banking. The jury wants to know he made money, had an airplane. These people lost money. He was in charge. What's the question? Guilty, guilty, guilty. So that was what I was facing. And so I think if this is the change I would make. If the government's going to offer you a plea deal because they're concerned about their case, then the trial should never be allowed to have more sentencing than the plea deal that was offered. So if you offer me 5 and I say, no, thanks, I'm going to trial, if I'm found guilty, I shouldn't get more than 5, because the only reason I'm going to trial is to clear my name. But we've eliminated that option because of the trial penalty. And we're putting people in jail for decades because they bothered to clear their name. And so that's what my attorney convinced me of. He said, listen, we know the truth, James, but you've got to decide. You can go into prison and convince every inmate in there that you didn't commit a crime, and I'm sure they'll believe you. And in the 30th year, you can celebrate that you've been in jail for 3 decades and that you're innocent. Or we can figure out a way to help this prosecutor get what he needs, which is you to plead guilty to a specific set of facts so that we can get you home with your family. I mean, that's the criminal justice system as it is today. And it's not good. It's not great. And I don't want to say any of the characters involved in my case did anything malicious, because I don't think they did. They just ran the system they knew how to run. And it's a win for the government every single time. So if you do get innocent people that are caught up in it, they're stuck. They're stuck. And if they bother to try to clear their name, they're going to be in jail 2 or 3 decades. So they better figure out a way to plead guilty to something so they can get the government what they need and get back home. I mean, sadly, that is what is happening in our criminal justice system. It's a compromise situation. It's not the way it was designed to be. I don't think Ben Franklin, I don't think John Adams, I don't think these great founding fathers had this intention when they set up some of these rules. But today, it's a system of plea bargains, and I don't think that's right.
I don't know if I asked you this, but what was the most meaningful moment in your entire life?
Boy, that's hard. That's hard. I mean, I've got 6 amazing kids, and I think there's been so many amazing moments with them. If we were to take that aside, because that's got to be the highlight of my life is those kids and their highlights. You do as a parent feel like you take some credit for some of that stuff, even though you shouldn't. I would say, the decision I made to change my plea from not guilty to guilty was probably the hardest decision I've made in my life. And I would say it was it took 9 years to get there. I mean, if you can imagine being so principled and serious and strong in what went down and what happened, and you've breathed every breath of it and walked every step of it, and you know what went down, and faced with the unfortunate dilemma of needing to change your opinion, I would say that's the defining moment of my life. Trying to get there. Yeah. I mean, I've had some amazing moments. I've had some pinnacle summit seeking moments in my life that were just fantastic, but that's probably more emotion and energy was used to get there than anything else I've experienced to date, for sure.
So the last question I'm going to ask you, and then we'll stop and we'll talk a little bit after the show, is
Okay.
what advice do you have for young people?
Yeah, I get the benefit, the blessing of having my kids involved daily in my life. I've got one that just finished college, a young girl, Tessa, just graduated college, and she's starting her life. She's starting to be a young adult. She pays all her own bills. She's got a roommate. She's She just bought a car for the first time, went into a car lot, negotiated a deal, called me from the side of the car lot to talk about the deal and the details. So, and then I've got a son. We just dropped off to his sophomore year. He's at Brigham Young University, and he's a scholarship, computer science scholarship there. And I have the great blessing of giving advice on a regular basis. You know, as a dad, you try not to just always be about advice. You know, sometimes you just want to enjoy their presence, but you feel like there's enough life lessons. You want to warn them, right? You want to prep them. You want to make sure they're ready for life. I would say, and this is going to be a little controversial, George, for your audience, but I would encourage your audience to stay away from drugs. I would encourage your audience to stay away from alcohol, truthfully. And I know everybody thinks that's some type of cool, popular thing to do, but I'm going to tell you, I think it's got an insidious way of corrupting your mind and your judgment. And I think if you will keep control of your mind, keep control of the asset that you've been blessed with, you can make better decisions. You'll never have anything you regret happening that you didn't choose to do. You won't have all sorts of things go on that were out of your control. I don't want your audience to give up control ever. They should keep control of their lives. And so I would just strongly suggest keep control of your mind at all costs. Do nothing that could corrupt or harm or destroy or erode your mind. It is the singular asset that buoys the spirit. It encourages you when you're down. It's the script writer for your life. It's the stage producer for your life. It's the one who decides who the friends will be, who the friends will not be. It's the one who decides these thoughts are important. I'm going to take action. These thoughts should be discarded. Your mind is the control mechanism for your life. And I would just advise everybody to do everything they can to preserve, protect, educate. You do everything you can to enhance the power of the mind. And that would be my advice to you and your audience.
I think that's a great place to end off. Any final words before I stop the recording?
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons in the audio version of Inside Out. We do have a new YouTube account that we're starting, but Apple and Spotify have Inside Out with James Catledge, 2 seasons where I cover the legal battle and then the inside the federal prison in great detail. And I think there's so many lessons in there, George, that your audience would benefit whether they ever get near a prison. The lessons learned throughout the experience, I try to share with the audience. And the audience is, we got 27 countries now tuned in. And I think the reason they're there is not because of the prison story, but because of the lessons in there. And they're 20-minute episodes. I would encourage the audience to go to Inside Out with James Catledge. There's an Instagram account, which I know you follow, George. And then there's of course, the Spotify and Apple. And we'll be using YouTube now to do more episodes and interviews. But I appreciate you inviting me to be on your podcast. And I just want to congratulate you for all you're doing with your podcast. You're making a difference to these young people. And I appreciate you including me today in your show.
Thank you so much. All right. And with that, in 3, 2, 1.